Maxine, Safety's Hospitals Foundation Trust has developed some very interesting ways of supporting teams that are experiencing difficulty in performance or relationships. Can you tell us briefly how you identify those situations and what support you offer to teams in difficulty?
Yeah, I think we've done a lot of work within the organisation now so that the teams themselves have a lot of insight on what constitutes a team falling into difficulty. So most of the time now the teams themselves do that diagnosis and come forward. Occasionally it's other people within the organisation that worry about their partner teams or colleagues. Only very rarely is it external measures or patients themselves that indicate to us that the teams are falling into difficulty. And we're trying to move to the sort of former end of the curve really, where it's always the teams that can spot themselves. So that's the diagnostic end of that.
And then what do you support them with when if they come forward with difficulties?
I think the first level of intervention is always trying to help the teams explore for themselves why the situation has arisen, and invariably they know, but no one person knows. It's the collective knowing that we create together. So usually that's done through workshops, discovery interviews, and there's an intervention put together, sometimes over a few months actually, to help the team explore in detail and in depth why they've ended up where they've ended up.
Maxine, when people come into your trust, having worked in other parts of the NHS, do they remark on that experience and level of support as being unusual?
Yes, they do, and I think it's quite difficult for managers initially because it is a very different end of the spectrum that we work with. So often managers and leaders struggle when we talk about honest conversations, and it takes a while to get the skills of doing it and to get over your own personal discomfort of dealing with situations that in many organisations it's just covered up or kept under the carpet.
In the Mid Staffordshire inquiry, one of the issues that's come out is around people's willingness to come forward and identify problems, whistleblowing if you like. With support available in your trust, have you noticed that people are more willing to raise issues of concern?
I mean, we monitor that, so we've got some evidence that people are more willing, but I don't think you should ever be complacent to think that you've got it exactly right. What I notice over the years I've done this work is people are more willing to stop you in the corridor or have conversations with the chief executive about things that are not going right. And we've had a recent example of Simon, the chief executive, has started a blog, and it's been fascinating what people are willing to put on that blog actually. In a very public space. So I think we've got lots of examples of where we believe we've got evidence of the culture opening up, people being more willing to talk about difficult things. We would see whistleblowing as the wrong end of the curve really. Absolutely. We'd want to be in much earlier on, so it's how you listen to those difficult conversations.
One of the other papers that you provided us with talked about the turbulence of reorganisation of nursing staffing. What does your trust do when you put in place a structural change to understand the impact of those changes and to support people through those changes? I mean,
we do what I suppose every organisation tries to do. We try to do the change management as well as we possibly can, and we try to project manage it well. We try to do the unintended consequences. We don't get it right 100% of the time, but I think what we're proud that we do is we go back and look. So we've recently done a couple of restructures that actually haven't been as good as we would have liked them to have been, but we've sat down systematically and reviewed what went wrong, what didn't go as well as we wanted it to do, and we'll put that into place next time. So I suppose it's that constant review process that we've got at the heart of the organisation, really.
Constant learning.
Constant learning, and just an expectation that things will go wrong and that it won't be punitive when it does go wrong.
Mid Staffordshire, like many other trusts, had some challenges for its managers in their first line roles, and that's a very difficult job for people to move into if they come from a clinical background. Can you tell us a bit about the type of support that you offer to people making that transition from being a clinician to being a manager?
Yeah, we run a frontline leaders programme. I think it's different in that we do a lot of work on authenticity in Module 1, so we do an awful lot of diagnostic work with them, personality assessments with them, and writing a career chronology to help them understand what led them to this current position and why they've chosen to do what they do. So we do a lot of that work that's fundamental before we do developing people, developing managing resources. So I think the authenticity work is probably the most important work we do. The work we don't do that we've realised is a gap for us is that work on helping people bridge their expectations of what that work, what that job is really going to be like, and that's our current challenge, along with talent managing, sort of getting a pool of people who really understand those frontline jobs and want to do them, rather than people getting into them and finding they're not what they expected them to be.
So building not only the technical competence, but the attitudinal and behavioural competence is really important from your experience.
Yeah, and I think enabling people and allowing people to leave the technical competency behind, because they revert back to technical competency when it gets tough, when actually what they need is the interpersonal competency and the leadership competency at that point. Absolutely. But it's easier just to become a great nurse or a great physio again. So it's trying to deal with the identity issues that people go through as they move from being a clinician into clinician leader role.
Absolutely. Picks up on one of the points that Karen was making in her paper about the predominant leadership style in the NHS is one of pace setting. Yes. And that would echo very much.
Yeah, and how we move them through to coaching styles at certain times is really important, and an appropriate use of pace setting rather than inappropriate use.
Maxine, thank you so much for being very open about the strengths and also some of the limitations that your organisation faces.
Thank you.